Hi, welcome to Nuance with Nikki, the nitty gritty, even if it's shitty. Over here we have adult conversations. Over here, my channel is typically not appropriate for kids, although I think this one might be good. I'm not sure. Let's be safe and say no. We're going to be looking at a South African historic rap. I won't be copyrighted for it, but we're going to do this. We're going to learn a bit about Cape Town history, really intrinsic to South African history. I do hope that legislators and future legislators watch this, in spite of the fact that I'm going to be very informal at Nuance with Nikki. I do not pretend to be something I'm not. I'm very informal. I see it as me, your sister, having a conversation with you in your living room, and I don't hold anything back. Okay, so we're gonna be looking at the 1997 rap by the good and great Brassa van die Kaap. Okay, so let's have a look. Welcome to the South African chat, and let's gooi. Let's learn about Cape Town. Let's learn about the specific culture, and I will do my best to translate it. I am from Joburg, so there's a bit of cultural context I'm missing, but I believe I can bridge a gap at the very least. So the song is called Cape of Storms. Of course, that was the original name for Cape Town, and it's from Brassa van die Kaap, Brothers of the Cape. So it opens up, right, and there's a dude that's really hurt that someone has sworn at his mother. He then goes on to try and defend his mother's honor. Okay, so just listen to it. So my broer is kind of like, it comes from my broer, my brother, and it's associated with South Africa's colored people, particularly the Cape Townians.
Ja, die kapers weer vol storms, die gangsters bots alweer. Het maakt mij het meer zeer om te zien hoe Brassa wat samen op een groeien doodgaan, of van die toekies zit. Ik bid, want die duivel het een muur gebouwd tussen mij en die man van
I mean, I think that is self-explanatory.
Hij is mijn club uit, wie zag mijn township zijn potteroe. Mijn broer, wat gaan zo? Wie zijn katje van die baan? Zonder wens ik maar die wereld kan vergaan.
So as I understand it, Katje van die Baan is kind of a socialite. It's a very social person, and it is in Transvaal Afrikaans. It's a Kaiki van die Baan, the cat on the tracks. Okay.
Sy moet toepas en nooit geboorte skenk aan 'n jongetjie baby nie. Dis wat hulle sê op agenda. Hulle wys altyd lelike prente van ons mense. Hoekom moet ek altyd 'n gangster verklop soos as al wat hulle sien in hulle koerante en TV's?
Interestingly enough, this dynamic is one that has been discussed on my channel before. A young girl, thinking that she had told me off, came and just started speaking old stereotypes that colored people have dealt with. At this point, we're not even surprised, right? But I do want to give you guys an idea of what it looks like when colored people are portrayed as gangsters. It happens to this day. Okay, so have a look at how a South African voice on BBC, a non-colored voice, is the voiceover, then speaks out and says the following.
The following report contains some disturbing images.
And immediately after disturbing images, you've got it opening there on a toddler, not a crawler, just a new walker. You've got her mom looking at her lovingly, and immediately children who...
Notorious for gang wars.
Immediately children who are, how old are they? 5, 6, after that voiceover, are already perceived in the popular mind as gangsters, right? And you open up here on a street. To me, it's very clear that none of these people are gangsters. It's just a young teenage girl going about her business. You've got just some mom sitting over there, you know, that sort of thing. But so deep does this stereotype run that the average South African does associate that to an extent with all colored people. It almost doesn't matter to an extent how well spoken you are or that kind of thing. Of course, it's a matter of degrees, but I would challenge that stereotype. Okay, let's listen to more of the voiceover, okay? And notice the contrast between the words that are being said and the people, particularly children, who are being portrayed in this manner.
The Cape Flats, notorious for gang wars and drugs. It has one of the highest murder rates in the world. In Hanover Park alone, 20 gangs vie for territory, and yet thousands of people call this place home.
Okay, so it's true. Colored people don't shy away from the fact that there is a gangsterism problem. What I take umbrage with and what the song takes umbrage with is the fact that that is the only portrayal of us, as if there's absolutely no variance with us. And I did in my last video a mathematical equation in which I showed, like, in a community that's small, a community so tiny, 5.5 million people, even if each of us were to live up or down, shall I say, to the stereotypes that people hold of us, the scale of what we could do compared to any other monoracial group, it would still not dent it if the rest of you guys did the same thing, if only 10% of you guys did it. Only 10%. You know, even if our whole population, our kids, our grandmothers, or whatever, did that. So I just feel that it's grossly unfair. I feel that it's bullying, and I would just say, stop it. You know, what are people going to say? I've just mentioned that we don't make excuses for it. In fact, just give me a second. So here's just an example. I'd like to introduce you to the difference of what happens when people who haven't got stereotypes of colored people actually perceive them. Colored people on the Cape Flats. So now earlier I said it was a BBC portrayal of South Africans. As we know, all South Africans have been portrayed, irrespective of their race, negatively by the BBC. But in spite of that, this is a British podcast, someone with no preconceived notions, and listen to the nuances of how she perceives the people of Cape Town. She sees what's right in front of her in a way that the South African trained mind at this point refuses to do. It depends on the person, but I'm challenging our own people. Kyk ook 'n bietjie, luister, okay? If you're wondering where to find this, I will put a link in the description. Let me actually just tell you. Right over here, I created a website for my hometown, Innerdale, Women of Victory, and on the addiction page, so there's the website, Innerdale Women of Victory, right? As a non-Christian for my mom's church, I created it. If you go down to addiction and you click there, you will find it right there, okay? And I have to be telling colored people, you're not the only ones facing addiction. And I showed people facing addiction from all over the world, Americans, you know, rich people too. Poverty and coloredness is not, we don't have the monopoly on addiction, but there is also a cultural context. And it doesn't help when big race groups, frankly, bully a small race group, right? And also push those stereotypes onto the rest of us that aren't like that. And what can I do but speak out, right? So let's listen.
You know, it's just been a privilege. So our first guest is Stephen, a recovering addict and ex-gang member from South Africa. And over the last year or so, I've had the privilege and the opportunity to do work with people over in South Africa. And, you know, I've been completely blown away by the severity of poverty over there. You know, there's no government funding, there's no benefits. And we've spoke about on the podcast the UK alone, like the difficulty that it can be to get treatment for drug addiction. And that is with small amounts of government funding, and we're fortunate enough to get benefits and things. So the struggle is real, the struggle is everywhere. But yeah, I've been blown away by the severity of poverty, yet the people over in South Africa, they maintain such dignity and hope, and the incredible work that's being
They maintain such dignity and hope and incredible work
done to help one another find a way out of a life.
to help one another find a way out. This is Cape Town they're speaking of, and they deserve credit for that. So Cape Town, as a Joburger, I'm behind you, Cape Flats. I'm behind you, I see you, and so does this lady in Britain.
Of addiction and crime, and that's why I wanted to get Stephen on today to tell his story. So hi Stephen.
Hi.
Hello, thank you for coming on. What I'd really like is for you to share with us your experience, a bit of your life story really, and where drugs and crime took you and where you are today.
So
And what I'd really like is for my audience to listen to Stephen first and foremost as a human being and not as a notion in a textbook or a notion fed to you about colored people, please. Put yourself in his shoes.
in answering your question, 35-year-old male, grew up on the Cape Flats, grew up with a single mother. She had put me through good schooling, good high school. I was
So we've got a mother, one of millions of colored mothers, doing their best on working class salaries to give the very best schooling, in spite of gangsterism, to their kids.
deep into drugs already. And because I was living in the area I was living in, gangsterism.
I just want to point out that some of the richest schools in this country have drug parties while their parents travel overseas. I've heard it from the horse's mouth from these kids. That is a phenomenon that happens all around the world. And one of the stereotypes that ghetto children face, which I find rather unfortunate. One of the stereotypes as someone who grew up in a ghetto and went to private school that I find unfortunate is the fact that ghetto children, and hear me out, just hear me out. Ghetto children from anywhere in the world are seen as if not only they are the only druggies, but they're just seen as people who do drugs when rich kids are not afforded that stereotype. Do you know what I mean? And it's not as if the poor kids can afford the best drugs anyway. The rich kids are doing often more dangerous drugs in those posh private schools. Just wanted to point it out as a child of both worlds. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Stephen, take it away.
Was rife. You had no choice but by an association. So it's either you're part of it or you protected it.
Now, many of you know how frightened you are of colored people. Imagine if there was a whole group that didn't give you a choice. That stereotype of gangsters, there are those that exist. Do you think we're fearless in the face of that? You're a child. Can you just add some context to that as well? And I'm going to speak more about it. It's not that we're not taking responsibility for those who are like that, but we're contextualizing. There are many shades of gray. Many, many shades of gray. Okay? I got your back, Cape Town.
When I was a 17-year-old male, I was keeping drugs. I was selling drugs. By the time I was 21, I had dropped out of varsity. I had become part of the number system. It was a really bad experience. Growing up on the Cape Flats with no people to really look up to as role models, you know what I'm saying? But my story is nothing.
Okay, I grew up in Hillbrow. I did not end up in drugs, but so many people did, and I do not judge them. I don't. In the ghetto as well, another thing for you guys to note is that a lot of us girls have only two choices, and that is to become either a car cookie or a kerk meisie. Let me tell you a little bit something about the whole stereotype. So many creolized people around the world, such as colored people, such as the Roma people of Europe, such as Latino people, we are seen as these people who have this teen pregnancy crisis. In my life, that has worked out so badly that even at the age of 38, I still have this weird paranoia. It doesn't make sense, but it's this weird subconscious paranoia that I'm going to be a pregnant teen. I'm literally old enough to be a grandmother in teen years. I literally am, right? But whenever I'm walking with a niece or a nephew down the street and anybody asks me, is that your child? I'm like, what do they mean, is it my child? What do they mean, is it my child? Do you know what I mean? That's how deep this runs. And for us kerk meisies, which is what I was, stuck in another prison, which I call religion, okay, and that's my personal story. I mean no indictment towards Christian people there. There are very good Christians. There are real Christians in the world. My experience has told me they're in the vast minority, however. Many of us and people across races can attest to this. We either have to become this hyper-religious girl because our only other option is church, or we have to become a car cookie. Car cookie means, cookie refers to cake, aka a female reproductive organ. And car means one who opens her legs, basically, for cars. Car cookie. Okay? And many times, those are the options that are presented towards you. Okay? I'd like to tell you, if I have time, about the Rat Pack. The Rat Pack experiment. Okay? For this insert, I'm just trying to add nuance to these stereotypes?
Special. It's common. It's an everyday thing, and literally there's no way out for most young men my age. I was one of the lucky ones to have made it this far, to have said that I have gone to varsity, I've gone out of gang activity, I've gone out of the drugs. It's by the grace of a higher power and through perseverance, and I would say 90% luck and 10% whatever entity it was that helped me through what I came through.
Can I ask, Stephen, what was it that got you into drugs and gang life?
I would say it was a number of factors that was far beyond my control. For example, I am colored, and maybe it's not the politically correct thing to say, but unfortunately we are classed that way. And not that it has kept me down, because everybody gets the same opportunities, but what I am saying is the demographic group that I did grow up in does have a certain history, and there are certain disadvantages for growing up in the area that I've grown up in. But to answer your question, how I actually got into it, there wasn't a father figure in the house. I had a mother that struggled. Gang violence was rife. There wasn't much opportunities. But not to make any excuses, I'm going to say that I was the person that made those choices, and I take responsibility, and I'm saying that I was the one that got myself into what I got into. But unfortunately, if you're going to go swimming with the sharks, at some point you are going to get injured, to put it lightly.
How did you exit gangsterism?
Like I say, in your area that you grow up in, it's either you become part of it or you protect it to a certain extent. And unfortunately for me as a young man, looking for acceptance in the wrong places, I had become part of that. It's about 13, 14 years back, And fortunately for me, the only way for me to exit that was there was a literal geographical removal. I literally had to remove myself from the area. That was the only way I'd gotten out of it,
So you've completed the rehab program over there, Camp Joy, and now you're doing work with them in Camp Joy. And another aspect of that is Ceasefire. Can you tell us what that is?
To put it basically, it's a program where we do gang violence interruption, and preventative measures are put in place to prevent gang violence. We identify gang violence, and we identify those high-risk individuals that might be future causes of violence in the area itself. And also it uses real-time data that's collected through various sources. And what the program basically does is it prevents violence, but it identifies those individuals that might be, the instigators of it itself. It's very, very, very systematic work, very scientific work, but it's also very intensive because lives are put at risk. So the ceasefire work, basically, it's gang violence interrupting work,
As you just said, it picks up where like shootings are occurring in live time, and then you guys from Ceasefire go and mediate between the current gangs. And I've seen some of the photos of what's being experienced out there, and it's just like you say, lives are put at risk. It's like,
Did you hear that? Did you hear that? This young Cape Townian man, who is also a colored person, is not just the stereotype. He's quite contrary to that. He goes head first as a man with his friends into the valley of the shadow of Cape violence while those guns are there they are. Does that fit your stereotype? Does it? Here is Camp Joy, about which Stephen was speaking. And what I want to ask you is, have you ever seen images like this? The gentle colored uncle just trying to make a way forward. Because these people are real too. Why is the bravery of colored men who go straight into the valley of the shadow of gunfire not that which is in the popular mind? I will address the colored community for their responsibility on this, but I am asking the larger South African community to question your own stereotypes, okay, as I play you this video.
A sign from love, something good, something kind, bringing peace to it.
know, there's a scripture that says, don't consume the seeds that you must sow. Program in Noah Park. We've got one in Seawinds, Vrygrond. We've got one in Tafelsig. We've got one in Dala. We had two in Kalksteenfontein as well. And then we also have another extended feeding program in what we call Noah Park South. That side of Noah Park. So, but these feeding programs, they depend on donations. And then a segment of the feeding program is funded by social development, which has worked out, it cost about R8.95 to put the warm plate of food on the table for someone. So our request always to communities is we don't want R1 million. If every community member can sponsor our program with the R8.95, then that R8.95 puts a plate of food on the table for an individual, for a family member. So hence, if 1 million people give R8.95, then we have fed 1 million people for that particular month, that particular season. So my encouragement is to people, if you have R8.95, you sponsor the R8.95.
Is the resourceful coloured man something that exists in the popular mind? Someone who, for his community, created a program in which you can feed people for R8.95. Does that exist in the popular mind? Do you hear what I'm saying? So, yeah. No, I was going to make it shorter, but let's have a look at this. Once you have been shown the so-called disturbing images, can I ask you to look, because only you can choose to look, at the courage of the coloured people in these circumstances, and then further looking at the challenges they face in spite of their courage. Okay? Rock in a hard place, but we're still standing. We're still here, in spite of plenty.
Notorious for gang wars and drugs, it has one of the highest murder rates in the world. In Hanover Park alone, 20 gangs vie for territory, and yet thousands of people call this place home. Craven Angle Ceasefire Project works with former gangsters to diffuse tension on the streets.
But it is a high-risk area. Gunfire every day, and altercations every day, and high-risk activity on the streets every day.
Nigel Davids is desperate to get out. His life of violence and drugs has taken its toll.
My friends, most of them got shot dead, and most of them are in prison. I was also in prison, and things are not getting better.
While some shootings are intentional, others are purely victims caught in the crossfire.
So, when it comes to gangsterism, one of the points that I want to make is that in the South African subconscious, there seems to be this idea that it is innate to coloured people, right? And I mean, but this TV show, who's made by a real gangster in America, and it's quite a brutal TV show. I love it. It's a beautiful piece of art, but does it cut into my soul. I couldn't even finish it at some point. What it demonstrates is that even in the wealthiest country, irrespective of race, gangsterism happens to people who absolutely do have other options, right? So there's nothing morally deficient about coloured people. There's nothing morally wrong with the Cape. They are not unique in this, and they do have variables that I guess, because I believe that life is a matter of degree, I would hazard a guess, a weight heavier to carry than people in a first world country. Again, that's not to minimize what other people are going through, but life is messy, and it does have a lot of shades of grey, and to ignore those when it's easy to demonize coloured people is just, that's all I want to point out. You know what, if I haven't said it perfectly, I haven't said it perfectly. It's not like people have respected coloured people themselves. Constantly want to take our narrative, and I say ours even though I've never been involved in stuff like this, because that same stereotype is pushed onto me, right? When meanwhile back at the ranch, this little boy who lost his legs, how responsible is he for any of this? Imagine it please being your child, because that's what it's like for me.
In prison, and things are not getting better.
While some shootings are intentional, Others are purely victims caught in the crossfire. 8-year-old Ziad George was on his way to the shops on a Sunday morning when a stray bullet ended up in his spine. He will
8 years old, that would make him a grade 2 or 3, on his way to the shops on a Sunday morning, probably buying bread or milk for his mom that was probably trying to keep the home together. Okay, and before you go, well, they went to jail for their crimes, I would just like to point out that while there are people who go to jail for things that they are responsible for, you've seen enough of these images, right? You've seen enough of this level of dehumanization, right? You have. Okay? Is that them worshipping even in the hell of jail? But have you paid attention that the rate of incarceration in South Africa for the colored people far dwarfs any other race? Okay, the smallest race group with the biggest incarceration rate. Do not for a second tell me that one that dwarfs even the space between African Americans and those in their country has absolutely zero racism and prejudice behind it. That is laughable. While you are stereotyping me and saying, you should take responsibility, I have shown you countless videos now of colored people taking accountability in spite of the circumstances without hiding the fact that these things happen, right? Can you take accountability for your subconscious bias and the culture to which you contribute? Okay? Especially, I'm asking any legislators who may be watching this. Please be aware of this, because you have lost South Africa. You've lost South Africa much talent, plenty of lives. And it is not just the kind of people you're robbing, it is yourself. And for the last thing I'm going to say is I'm going to remind you that one day you will be the ancestor of a mixed race child, and I ask you then to reflect on this in a way that you might not be reflecting now. I was supposed to do a reaction to the whole rap video, but I think it's been far too long right now. This has been Nuance with Nikki, the nitty gritty, even if it's not pretty. This is not where I expected my video to go, but my spirit spoke. So once again, think about your stereotypes and have a lekker day, nah. Ciao for now.